Okay, grab your notebooks first. We're going to work some more on the robots. I'll go around checking with everybody on the robots. But we need to be, anything that's more complicated like the robot or some object that has multiple components to it. Jose pointed this out last week that UV unwrapping is certainly more complicated than just throwing a bunch of materials and everything. However, the bunch of materials is okay for a lot of instances, but for any more advanced texturing stuff, making a UV map for the object is just absolutely necessary so that it has like a defined texture space. So allow me to demonstrate something slightly different, I guess. Let's make something that has two parts, right? So just sort of part of a robot here, but a little bit simpler. So it'll be like another robot hinge sort of situation. And so this, keys are all messed up. There we go. And then we'll create another part maybe from sphere. All right, so this is going to like rotate around in that part. Kind of like this. Another one that I've talked about with some of you guys, so I want to extrude this top of this sphere out. Right, so if I were to grab these polygons here, for instance, and UL, those, hit D, let's see. It comes out, but kind of like at an angle. Sometimes when I know I want this to come out straight, I don't use extrude at all. I just control drag the polygons. And so that's allows you to sort of have more control over how that works in some instances. Why does my alt keep, am I just playing the wrong key? There we go. All right. And again, I'll go ahead and put a bevel underneath this one. And just to smooth out the corners. And also under this, hit C on this. There we go. So this is like a ball and socket joint kind of situation here. Let's make sure the anchor point for this looks correct. And then this one would also want to spin around this anchor point. And so let's fix that one as well. And so here, I'm going to go to anchor point mode, snap, and move that one also there. Turn those off. And let's turn both of these into geometry so that the bevel geometry can be included in the UV map. And we can do it with just, yeah, I've been using, there's two commands that do this. There's, if you have a bunch of procedural geometry, so what does it mean if something's procedural? What color is the object usually if it's procedural? Like if it's doing a thing based on inputs, it's generating stuff. Like what color are all the, yeah, green, right? Those are all the green objects, the spline, the sweep, all that stuff. They do things based on inputs. They're performing a procedure, they're performing a thing. And so in order to get things ready for UV unwrapping and for any exporting to another program, Unity, or doing anything else with it, all the procedural stuff needs to go away. Right? The other programs don't know about the procedural stuff. If you were to just open a C4D file over there, that wouldn't work. And so there's two commands to sort of bake. Right? So this word comes up often. And we go from an algorithm to raw geometry. This concept comes up in textures as well, and the same idea is there too, right? We can go from a vector, right? So a vector, something that you would make in Illustrator, is not pixels, right? It's all information about splines and curves and everything like that. But when you save it out as a PNG, you bake it down into pixels. Does that make sense? Right? So this word baking comes up in many instances here, right? You can think of it also like printing, right? You have the working version of it, and then you have to distill it down into like the raw stuff eventually, right? But for 3D, it's points, edges, and polys, and for 2D, it's going from whatever into just raw pixels. That's the end part. And so here, when we do this with these things, right now this thing is still somewhat procedural because it has the deformer on it, right? And it's important that we get rid of this one in this instance because the bevel is actually creating more geometry, and we want that geometry to be represented on our UV map. And so let's grab both of those and connect objects and delete. I'm going to go ahead and put that as a button up here for right now. And now it's just, you see the bevel went away, and now I just have two pieces of geometry. We'll call this upper part, and we'll call this lower part. Right, and so the command to bake down procedural geo with the connect objects and delete. All right, so that bakes it down into one thing. You can have a whole list of things. We just did this morning with somebody who made a whole bunch of flowers. Did she get any further with that? Okay, yeah, I'll have to think about it some more. Connect objects and delete, you can have a whole bunch of things and it'll just smush it down into one mesh, right? And obviously you don't want to do this with pieces that you need to move separately, right? When they need to have independent motion, they need to be separate mesh objects, right? But that bakes that down. The other command here is useful. I'll show you something fun I showed Tyler last week that's slightly different. And so I have a cube and I have a plane, and we'll make a tablecloth. And so we're going to use a simulation, right? So there's several different types of simulation in Cinema 4D or in any of these programs. There's a simulation just for what they call rigid body. Right, so this would be stuff that doesn't squish. No squishing, right? It's just as if everything is just a solid block of some kind. For squishy things, it's called soft body, right? Soft body, way more expensive than rigid body. Okay, so squishy things are fun, but it's orders of magnitude more computation to compute squishy than it is to compute not squishy. And then there's also a cloth simulation for simulating, cloth, drapes, tablecloths, clothes to some extent, that kind of thing. These are all three different simulation stuff. Let's just talk about the cloth for a second. And on the plane, I'm going to hit C and Shift C, cloth. And yeah. The important ones here are cloth tag. And so this would be the thing that you want to be cloth. This one goes on there. And then, inevitably, it needs to hit something, right? Or lay down on something or interact with something. And this needs to have that tag on it, right? And so this is going to be the tablecloth. This is going to be the table right there. And so I will, both of them, all the simulation stuff works better with meshes, not primitives, right? So if you set it up and it's not working, inevitably it's almost because you got to turn it into the raw points. And so I'll come up here with Shift-C, cloth, collider. I'll throw that on the table, call this table. And then over here we'll call this cloth. And then I will Shift-C and put the cloth tag on that. And now if I hit play, there we go. It does a cloth simulation on this piece of cloth here. The simulation, this cloth simulation is like a subset of a soft body simulation, right? Its parts move based on its vertices. And so you can see that if I were to take the cloth here and subdivide it more, Control A, let's say subdivide, and then run the simulation again. There we go. It's because it was not bending the individual quads before, right? It was, and there were less quads, so it was less resolution. However, the downside to that is that more subdivision is more calculation, right? That would be slower. In this case, the winning cloth formula is almost always, a little rough like this, and then throw the result into a sub-D so that it smooths out. That usually looks pretty good in that sort of instance, right? Where now it's performing the sim right here, here, can never get the right one, here, here, and here, right, at those points. But it's subdividing and smoothing out the whole thing at all of these points. Right? Subdividing math is way less math than simulating math for the most part, right? And so it smooths all that stuff out. Does that make sense? Okay, so in this case, what I'm doing right here is like my job is to make a tablecloth. Instead of trying to model the tablecloth by hand, I'm running this sim, and this takes us to the other command I wanted to talk about, current state to object, right, is the second baking command I want to draw to your attention. And so this is really great for this simulation to model. There's a lot of instances where this works well. And so now, I don't want to run this simulation every time I want to see the tablecloth. I just want to have the tablecloth sitting there. And so I can get both of these, right-click, or just Shift-C, and current state. Gotta spell it right. There you go. Current state to object. And this gives me just the tablecloth, right? No longer a simulation, but this is, you can see it's a great way to get this kind of shape, right? After you've modeled a table, like you guys have, if you want to put a tablecloth on it, this would be the way to do such a thing easily, right? Without having to, it just makes more sense to do this kind of thing this way. This is how it would work in the real world, and inevitably that gets better results in this instance. Right, so 2 baking commands for baking sort of geometry down, right? Connect objects and delete. That's the one I go to first. And then when you're doing the simulation kind of stuff, the current state to object, where I kind of need, I ran something in time, and now I just want to take a slice of time out of there and just freeze that one slice of time. And so those are the 2 I would be talking about there. Right, and so I use the connect objects and delete in order to bake the bevel deformer into the other file I was working on there, this one. let's just test the rotation on this to make sure that I got that right. So this would go that way, and this would go, nope, this one needs to be anchor point, snap, orthographic, E. I want this one to also rotate right there. Cool. So now if I put R, there we go. If I press here, there we go. So they both share the same anchor point, right? So that's rotating around that ball and socket joint that we built there. Cool. So this isn't crazy. We've done this before. Let's talk about UV unwrapping this. So I'll go to UV edit and polygon mode and get these things here. All right, so for this one, again, starting to think about where I want to slice things, right? So if I go to the edge mode here on this, our existing commands help us out a lot here. UL for there. We'll break that off into a separate part and then try and slice the other part all around. And so on the loop select, there is this other really nice box that says stop at selections and stop at pulls. And I think if we click both of those in this instance, there we go. We can cut this in half real easy, right? So now the loop selection is stopping at this selection there. And then the other end of it is a pull, right? A pull is a point not connected to 4 edges. It's 3 or it's more than 4. And so that allows us to easily select this here. Oops, I want to hold down Shift while I did that, so that I have both of it. There we go. Did I get it? I think I got it. And now, there we go. So this is kind of what I wanted. This over here, not so great. And so if we come back here, let's just get this. And so here I can grab these. And I just want to remap those. There we go. Right, so if I say cubic, it just sort of gives me that flat top to it. And then I could just, again, hit T and scale that down. E, and just move it out of the way. All right, so we sort of satisfied our requirements there. As far as what were our general rules about our UV unwrapping? We want to avoid no overlapping polygons, right? Polygons. We want it to be understandable so that when we look at it, it somehow represents our object and we understand what parts are what. We want to minimize distortion. And we want to keep the scale proportional with some exceptions, right? Remember the one we looked at? What was the one we looked at on Wednesday? I think it was Wednesday, where one of the parts of the mesh was much bigger on the UV map than it was in the actual geometric space. Yes? The human face. Remember, we looked at that standing person from the content browser, and the face was normal face size, but then in the UV map, the face was way bigger, right? Because we wanted more detail, right? So more pixel density equals more detail on that part of the map. There we go. Cool. And so now, this is a separate mesh here. So this one gets its own UV space because it's a separate mesh on this part here. And so on this one, we might be able to go UL on this. And so I'll loop select here, loop select there, and then stop at selections right there. Let's see what that does for us. So this gave me what I wanted. I got this part here, the top and the bottom. Not so great. Let's do those separately, just sort of re-project them here. So I'll get this one. I'll say UF. Right, so all of those selection commands, just they're super important when you're modeling, even more important when you're selecting stuff for UV selections. UF. And say cubic there. There we go. And in this case, probably hit T, E, R. Does it make sense what I did so far? To get this UV map here and to get this one? Yeah? Okay. So again, I'm sort of figuring out how I want to unwrap things, cutting. Let's codify this into a series of instructions. So select the edges to cut, right? So this is let's go with the Christmas present wrapping metaphor rather than the animal skinning metaphor. I think it's less brutal. I just had lunch, right? So if we're doing this before lunch, we might have selected a different metaphor. But here we're going to select the edges to cut, and then I'm using the UV unwrap button up here. And then I've been cleaning things up by selecting parts to reproject. And in this case, I just needed some sort of flat projection, and usually selecting the cubic option in lower left gives me those projections over there. You guys getting this on the stream? Everybody said hello, but then dropped off. Is it still going? I think it's still going. Yeah, I'm moving on there.
You're at step 4 in the stream.
Okay, yeah, I see Danielle's watching it over there too. But it's always delayed, right? You guys can't push it further forward in time.
It's delayed about 15 to 45 seconds.
It feels like it grows over the course of the.
Does it?
I mean, Yeah, but then in some of the night classes, by the time I'm done, it seems like they're like 5 minutes in the past. Like, but I don't know. I mean, I'm just watching the tiny one over here. It's hard to say.
Lisa wants to know, is the UV mapping used in general for every texture you want to apply, or just for complex ones?
We're going to say medium to complex ones, right? You wouldn't need to do this for very simple things, right? Like the piece of silverware. If it just needs to look shiny and metal, you would probably be fine just manipulating the material, right? The start of the stream was just delayed because I was late. It's not really the computer doing that. However, if you needed a fork with like food on it, right, where someone left like dirty food, that would be something where you would need to have UV texture information for that. And then there's a deal. You can get away with a lot more with our workflow this semester, right? We're living pretty much all semester long in Cinema 4D, right? We're going to render out of Cinema 4D, no problem. If things are going to a game engine like Unity, or you're handing them off to someone else, you almost always need to UV unwrap in that instance, because having an object that's UV unwrapped, where in Cinema 4D you may have applied 10 materials and sort of gotten away with it. When you bring that into Unity, each material on an object translates into what's called a draw call. So this is where the rubber hits the road in game design, is that you need the least amount of draw calls possible. What's a draw call? It's your CPU sending info to the GPU, and it's faster if you can. The least amount of this you can do. This is where the bottleneck is. The CPU is fast, the GPU is faster, but this is a bottleneck where you're sending the information over, and every time you have a material on an object, it's a separate draw call. And so, like if you did this chair and you did it the way just mashing a bunch of materials on there, where this chair had 5 different materials, and you transferred it over to Unity that way, it would be 5 draw calls just to get the chair on the screen. So whereas if it were UV unwrapped and then properly textured that way, it would just be 1, because all the information would be baked down into the texture at that point. So that's really where this stuff happens. Because we're not working in real time, or we're not worried as much about it, although I'll talk about it throughout the semester, because really more and more stuff is becoming real time, right? Like this becomes important. Yeah, but if you're not doing things in real time, you can definitely get away with like, how much do I need to optimize my render? Well, how much time do you have, right? And you can also solve that problem with more money, which a lot of people have done, right? If you're just not that good at it, but you can pay for a render farm, well, then you might be able to get away with it, right? It just depends. So, yeah, I would say super simple things could probably go without this, or but anything up from that, we would need to do this process, right? And this process isn't crazy in a lot of instances, right? Once you just sort of lay out some cuts and then hit the UV unwrap button, the new UV auto unwrapping algorithm has been pretty good, at least getting things going. But now I have this instance, which is kind of what I've been working towards here, where I have 2 objects, and I don't want to smush these objects together, right? Because this is going to be like a moving robot joint. This is directly applicable to your robots right now, right? When we talk about, right, what are we ultimately working towards? We're ultimately working towards UV unwrapping the robots that we've designed, right? As you're doing that, you may discover some fatal flaws, and you may need to go back and re-clean some of your modeling in order to make the UV unwrap work, right? So that be prepared for that one. You know, if UV unwrap becomes terrible, fix model. Right? It's not usually, if it's modeled well, the UV unwrapping should go fairly smoothly. Right? If there's a whole bunch of problems, and I feel like you guys are getting a better sense for this now. Like when you look at geometry, you can be like, you know, that doesn't look good versus something that looks cleaner, right? And so the cleaner it is, the easier this process is by far. And so that's what we're working towards, UV unwrapping our robot. You may need to fix things along the way. But this joint is an example of this, in that our robot, we also want our robot to animate, right? And so the robot, we can't just select the whole robot and say connect objects and delete, right? Because that would fuse the robot into one unmovable mesh. The robot wouldn't be able to move any parts of itself. And so we have this situation here, where I can't fuse these two meshes here, right here and here, because I need them to move independently. However, I would like to use the same material reading from these UVs. And so now I have finally worked towards UV packing. Whoop. Packing. Up. Packing. There we go. What is UV packing? Rearranging or combining UV maps. And so that's what we need to do here, is that we have a UV map for one part and a UV map for another part, and we need to make them both fit into the same UV space. So if I select both of them, and I come over here to UV packing, then you're done. There you go. Right, and so UV packing, right next to, right, these tabs down here are important. We got automatic UV, right? So this is where I was coming in and doing my cubic projections on the things I just wanted to straighten out, right? And then UV packing rearranges the selected polygons into the map. And it does a bunch of things by default. It makes everything proportional, right? So the size of these polygons here compared to this top part is correct, right, and proportional. And it also runs a bunch of space-saving algorithms to try and maximize the amount of pixel coverage, pixel density, so that everything is, you're leaving the least amount of pixels on the table. You're wasting the least amount of pixels, right? Because in the texture, this would be loaded onto the GPU here for the texture, but this stuff would never be used, right? But the way computers work is that you can't, you need to send a complete square of information, right? That's just, you can't cut it out like that or something. Does that make sense? All right, so that part's not too bad, right? Essentially, how do I pack UVs? One, you first unwrap. How do I pack UV maps for multiple meshes? One, unwrap each mesh. Okay, because all the packing algorithm is doing is taking the pieces that you've laid out and rearranging them. It's not changing any of the pieces. So you need to get the pieces looking decent before you run the pack. Then select all the objects to include in one UV space. Select UV pack tab. Run pack. And to be honest, I almost never fiddle with the settings on this. Like what it does automatically has been fine in the most. Yeah, like my problems. Usually, it's the first part, the unwrapping each mesh, right? Because that's the part where you have to uncomfortably confront your modeling deficiencies, right? There's nothing to make you more critical of your modeling skill than trying to unwrap your own models. You're like, oh, that's not good. But it's also a great educational tool in that like it forces you to go back and really reconsider how you built different things. Taryn, you're a wisdom meal, right?
That's me.
Oh, that's you.
Yeah.
Okay. What is your icon? The emoji?
It's just a character. Of the information I got a while back.
Wait, you made an emoji of your character?
No, my icon. No, the emails I used were just YouTube's. Those are just YouTube. I thought you were talking about my icon.
Oh, okay. So this looks different on your phone?
Yeah, those are just from YouTube's normal like emojis.
Oh, okay. Is this a wisdom wheel or is this just a cat?
It's the cat.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Maybe.
Stream update. Look at this. This might be an all-time high. My channel is setting records. 8 concurrent viewers. Hold on.
I'm sitting here watching it too. That might be contributing to it.
I noticed every once in a while you'll like check it and you'll see all of a sudden there's like a blip. That's
Mhm.
it's not right. That's exactly like all of a sudden there'll be a blip in other ones and I'll be like, I think that might be just because all of a sudden we'll see that you're like streaming so late or just whenever and be like, oh, he's on. Check and see if it's actually on, and then we're like, oh, okay. Like it's not our class, so we'll just like, what's he doing this time? I remember when we did that.
Well, you guys all have the bell turned on my channel, right? So like when I go live, it goes right to your phone, right?
Yeah.
Does it make a sound like ding 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 ding? It does? Yeah, okay.
I do understand. Yeah.
All right, so like and subscribe. And also, there is no, right, UV unwrapping, UV packing, that's it. That's the end of the road. There's no additional UV procedures I'm hiding from you. Like, once you get to this part where you have a good UV map, then the world is your oyster. All the texturing becomes not only more efficient, but sort of easier to do for all those things. Does that make sense for everybody? Yep. And then you guys are logging into Creative Cloud using your Maricopa IDs on your personal computers, right? Okay. I want you guys to do this. Okay, do not, we are working towards UV unwrapping the robot, okay? Don't try to do that right now. Just do 2 simple parts. It doesn't even need to be as complicated as what I did. Just 2 meshes, and UV unwrap both meshes, and then pack both UV maps into one mesh, into one UV space. Everybody with me there? Okay, give that a shot here. All you, to everyone watching at home. Oh my gosh, did we get up to 14 concurrent viewers? Everyone got on at the same time? Look at that. I just need to call for more attendance. Look at that. all-time high. There we go. Who has the most subscribers? Look out. I'm on my way. Is it still PewDiePie, or is it that Indian television station? It's the station? Yeah. I imagine it would be hard to compete with an entire continent of people. Does anyone in this class watch that guy?
Not really.
Okay.
I've never even heard of
Yeah, as an old person, I had also not heard of him until like old people started paying attention, and then was also kind of like, what? Why would anyone watch this guy? So give this a shot. Make two things, and then UV unwrap them, and then pack the UV meshes. Right. So we're working towards this. We'll come back to this in a second. Just try a simple one first, and then go up. Right. So just try like 2 blocks, put them together into one. So make a new control N using new file. And do you have your Creative Cloud open? Can you open your Creative Cloud?
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you scroll down to 3D stuff, what is it?
Like dimension and stuff?
That's okay, all the substance stuff. So if you painter and try.
Substance printers?
Yeah.
It just downloads it when you do that, I think.
Because it used to be able to get a full educational license. Just for that. Adobe bought Substance.
Oh, I see. I can download it real quick and see what it says.
Yeah, we'll watch it.
Pull some stuff out so it's
So, go to your browser once.
This one? Explain?
Just yeah, whatever. And just Google like Substance Painter student. Yeah. Yeah. Scroll down once.
Try logging with my stuff.
Or wait, you don't have an account already, right?
No.
So wait, let's go down. Yeah, click on, I don't know.
Create account?
Right, create. Okay, go ahead.
With my student email?
code.
There's this thing at the top talking about.
Yeah, let's see what that size is. You're on top of that. This isn't what you just filled out, right?
No, I think this is different. This looks like a verification thing.
Yeah. So go ahead and fill that out.
Which one should I?
Yeah, so just screenshot your schedule.
My schedule in Canvas? It's in there.
Probably do that. Yeah, just make sure it has your name and your
Yeah.
this semester. I mean, anything that just says the name of this class and then what's your name, that's what I say. Like class
I
name.
didn't. Did you see it?
Name at the top.
It's at the very top right there. I would just have to like zoom all the way out. Yeah, I can zoom out.
Yeah. Yeah, send in that and let's see. Anyhow, is it working? So in order to pack, you need to select all the components. So, and maybe, because it looks like there's some stuff that's not so good, you know, see how it's not all yellow. Let's control A. There you go, now you go. There you go. See how that worked? We have unpack 2 parts? Or pack 2 parts? Rather. Cool.
I don't know, should that piece be on the lens or would we have to take this little piece off from the clone
so you could just fix that part. So you could do I think it's UW, is select connected. Or just hit U. Okay, and that's telling us that may not be connected. And so maybe grab the other part, grab one of the polygons below it there. Yeah, hit shift click. Now do UW. UW, yeah, UW doesn't do the connecting. It just selects whatever is connected. Well, the second two parts are, but that top part.
Are you going to reconnect it? Here, so just go into edge mode. Okay, where is it that you need to cut on the phone? So UL. Select it. And then hit UV interface, but I wonder why it's not coming up. You're supposed to be able to select UV weld and relax. So it's on the different why it's not. Yeah, I mean, like right now it's not coming up either.
Grab both sides of it, optimize, and try it. But you gotta, I don't think you can optimize just for the edge.
Hold on, okay, wait. Hit UV weld and relax. UV weld and relax.
Where is it?
Right underneath PBR. That one. It's because you can't go slow.
It says there seems to be some degenerate polygons.
Degenerate polygons. Yeah, run and optimize on that whole part, these things.
Okay.
And click on. Yeah, right. Select all points before you optimize.
What did I do?
Oh, it depends on, so you would have to click hit 9. Click inside your window, right?
Oh,
Like you're
okay.
gonna click on the phone, and then hit Control A if you're gonna do Control A. There you go, and then right click, optimize.
Don't know what happened there.
I
Did
mean,
you have your optimize command set really wide?
Please help me. No? No.
Did you make that thing really, really small?
I wonder if well, no, because I mean either way, it doesn't make sense for the phone
Oh.
to have that many points on a point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so if you make a smaller thing at the top, but yeah, hold on, do the optimize one more time, and then just do a re-unwrap. So now if you grab,
Yeah, so if you grab that loop again in edge mode and you unwrap it again, it should make like a warp circle.
Wait.
well, now if you grab that top part and say select connected, you should be able to grab everything.
Yeah. I think you can also do it in polygon mode.
So, with the product designer,
Hit UV and that.
which one?
If you select one of these polygons here, just UW. So UW. It's like the polygons over there, are they inverted?
These? I don't know.
It's like the polygon?
No, which one?
Yeah, that's the way it is.
So just,
And the other.
solve them together. Oops, sorry.
I think he was talking about the blue.
Anything that's gray is where there's a seam. Does that make sense?
This is a
So
base.
because they're all separate, they're seams. So like what I would probably do is
Yeah, there's
There you
circle,
go.
that's circle.
That was weird.
yeah, it's icky. I decided to make my life difficult on purpose.
The sphere.
It's a sphere and a cube with a fillet.
Okay, it's just really neat. You got it all packed on there, good?
Yeah.
For sphere.
Sometimes you just gotta take it and get.
So how do you do that?
Okay.
So
If you ever take something apart, right, and it looks funny because it's all in pieces, what you do is you really weld and relax. After you put it together, back together, and do that in polygon mode, because what it'll do is it'll match everything just back together onto where it originally was. And then you can remake your cut in edge mode. So that way you'll have it where you want it to push.
Yeah.
okay.
So go to,
I've never done a bullet, so this is my first time.
Yeah, well, it looks nice.
so you just click there.
I don't know how you got the top to have so many points on it. No, you know what? I don't know.
Ow.
So cones have a top part.
Yeah, they do.
So when you made it editable, sometimes the point of the cone has all of those points.
You
on it.
gotta-
Oh, what's it called?
Yeah,
Wait,
you
what's
can
it
make
called?
the top flat.
Shift click when
Now,
you
what did he say?
Upwards?
Oh.
Yeah, so you want this.
Oh, a complex pole? Yeah. Yeah, you simplify. Technically, complex poles are not what you want. Like, if you can reduce the amount of complex poles you have, like, sometimes that looks good. But that's only if it's something that's going to be distorted. Like, if it's going to be scratched or whatever.
Yeah. So yeah, but you're right. It's because it's in the plate when you can expand it
Yeah.
into another.
The way that I try and get rid of complex poles, like this was the same as this before. It looked like that right on here, the point. So what I try and do is I try and have at least points that equal 4. And then I'm able to divide it up this way.
Alright,
So
you
that
gotta
way it
take your-
doesn't have any complex poles. It's nice and flat.
And then, what do you do? What's the view?
Yeah, that's
The only thing is that if you want it to be, it depends. If you want it to be ramped, then what sometimes we'll do is I will use the brush to pull it up and then smooth it down until it's the roundness I want it to be.
It's kinda got that white line.
But then it makes all of those planes non-clean. It just depends. You gotta pick one or the other. Cause triangles are usually always played
What
with
else is in-
squares.
Yep.
What are the other parts of this? Is there a part of
this space taken up by your islands because these are all pixels that are, still being calculated, even if they're not being used. So, I mean, like, in this way, it would be more efficient if you're trying to take up all that space.
Well, select all.
Whereas if you made it T to 900K,
Yeah, you just run
then
cubic.
it technically won't take up all that space.
On your outline, and now grab everything.
I think you also don't want like this could be fun. You just for sure don't want like a bunch of little tiny specks.
Oh yeah, the tiny little pieces.
Yeah, I usually don't like that.
Now it's like,
It just looks.
Let's see. Once I have to do that,
yeah, okay, so now if you go back to using your
it was a slip.
Yeah.
And I just had to do them like, you know what? I can't do nothing about that.
I hope with this right now.
So on the other side, you have select your yeah, turn off the two wheels. Yeah, so select the size that you give to this part here. Hold that shift. We're taking all that. There we go. Now. Something's turned on there. Let's see.
Okay, so Jose and Emily, can you post what you're not understanding? Let me see here. Or a question? So, yeah, the default seems to be keeping those edges. So if you have all the edges selected, right? So. But if you did unpack, you rewrap it. So, yeah, so we're just talking about putting two objects together. So not even in the robot right now, I just started with two objects in like a text file. So we made a new file. There. Yeah, I would just try to select. Right, so you need to hit C on both of them to turn them into geometry. And did they respond to you at all in your email?
They did almost right away.
What? Really?
Yeah, so it was, hold on, now I've lost it. Get it back. Got like an automatic response and it just gave me all the licenses.
Okay, so then,
I lost my web page. Oh, here.
then,
So this is what I got under licenses. So before we only had this and now I have 3 programs. Which I have till the end of next year.
okay, so now if you click on Windows version.
Windows version? Even though it's a Mac?
Oh, no.
Okay. Okay.
This is integrated with the Adobe one at all?
That's what I'm curious about. What we shall see.
We shall see in about 2.5 gigabytes. Let's see for 3 hours. Okay, Jose, can you send me your robot? Your optimized robot, right? So everyone has their robot optimized down to individual meshes right now? Yes, right?
Yeah.
Good. It also kind of makes me feel like maybe my robot is too simple. Like I was supposed to do a more complicated. The design of the robot is your call. Or do I just really? Yeah, it doesn't have to be overly complicated. Just whatever you wanted to do with your design. Jose, email me your robot, and we'll start using that as an example. Did I get my robot optimized down? Yes, send me the C4D file via email, Jose. Okay, so here we've got the idea. So we understand that we need to sort of get ours down to individual parts here and then UV unwrap those parts. And so here, let me do it with just these 3 parts of mine as an example, and then I'll use some other people's robots as part of the examples here. And so, yeah, these 3. Remember, when you bake stuff down, like we've talked about, turning it all into raw stuff, all the green objects, right, in Cinnamon 4D, those are generators, those are procedural. Once we bake, all those objects, the reason they're so great and flexible is because they are non-destructive. Right? You can go back and change the fundamental stuff the whole time, right? It's a very flexible workflow. So baking things down is destructive. You can't get back to the component parts that you use to make up everything. And so always save, everyone writing this one down, this is a huge thing. Always save a non-destructive version before baking down, so that if you need to get back to the original things to make adjustments, like you could do that there. Does that make sense, everybody? Yeah. And I mean, there's different ways to save it. You could just save it in a separate file, right? You should be all using the save increment on save. And then I've talked about this before, just in the same project, using that hider technique to keep all your procedural geometry in here, right? And so I'll just grab all these three, control drag them into the hider, make sure the hider is red, and then just forget about it, right? In case it's there, you know, in case something goes terribly wrong and you know, mistakes are made, I can always come back in here and start over, right? And so here, I'm going to select all the children, and then Shift-C, connect objects and delete. There we go. And then all right, so now this is lower neck for my robot. There's the head. And yeah, again, right-clicking, saying select all the children, and then connect objects and delete. There we go. And so this is upper neck. Cool. And so now these three objects need to be UV unwrapped, right? You should really have a joint here and here to put these together, but for right now, we'll leave it as is. Right? Let's get rid of these materials. I was just messing around with that for right now. We'll come back to that. And here, right? So UV unwrapping these parts. The head also has a bevel here, and so we need to get that in there. Shift-C, connect objects and delete. There we go. Right, so now there's no, how do we know in Cinema 4D that we've gone completely baked down? The green and purple are gone, and we are left only with blue geo objects, right? That's a sign that we have baked down into geometry. Does that make sense for everybody? Right, this is another reason the design of the C4D interface is nice, is that the color coding is meaningful and I think significant. Cool, I'm gonna check my anchor points. That's not where I want the head to rotate. I want the head to rotate actually around the circle here, so anchor point mode. And there we go. Cool, so let's look at this lower neck part. Right, and so this part, right, this is like a typical sort of mechanical part here in that it's, you know, the dimensions are fairly square, but we'd want it to go around each side. And so something like this, where it's got a clear, you know, clear side, 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 and side. This is a pretty good candidate for cubic, right? Because, you know, we can see that it has essentially 6 sides. There's some rounding at the top, facing in each direction, right? So we can look at that, and that looks like it would be a good candidate for that. And so let's come in here to UV unwrap or UV edit. Right, so I'll just grab this part here. I'll make sure I have all the polygons selected for this part. There we go. And in this case, you know, cubic, I'll come in here and automatic UV unwrap, select cubic, and say apply. There we go. That lays it out. So things that look mechanistic like this, you know, end up, you know, you can see that we have this side totally intact, that side, and then we see that it's cut up some of the faces that go around. And that looks fine. Now, this next part over here, you know, it's virtually the same thing, just shrunk down. And so again, I'll grab all the polygons and press apply for cubic. There we go. That's good. So we have this and this. And now the head, a little bit different, right? And so if we look at the head here, I definitely want to be able to texture this separately and draw attention to this. And so I'm going to make sure I grab this part here and say UL for this visor. right there, right? And again, UL, that loop select, really great modeling tool, also a really great modeling test, right? If UL stops working while you're modeling, it's because there's no longer a clear path around your object. And so that should be a good sign that like, I may need to reconsider some of the decisions I've made. Cool, so that's good. Now mine has this asymmetrical thing in the back here. And so I'm also going to cut that out. And so hold down Shift here, right? So I have that and that selected. And then this part here needs to be cut in half somehow. So again, UL and stop at selections. I'm going to turn that on. And so now if I were to, there we go, that should get us to be cut in half. And so I'll hold down Shift. There we go. And so now this inner stuff here, there we go. Let's see how that does. And so now, before, I didn't make any cuts. That's because I was coming down here and using this cubic, right? Because it sort of projects from all 6 sides. This is not going to work so well with that plan, which is why I use the edge tool to figure out where I want it to cut. And then I can UV unwrap this object using this command here, right? And so this is the one you would want to use when you are manually cutting the UV map, right? The ones in the bottom left are doing it without your cuts automatically. So let's hit it. Okay. And that's kind of what we wanted. This thing in the back I did is a little weird and asymmetrical. So this is, I'm getting some distortion here, especially in this part up here. And so I think I'm going to add a couple more things to divide it in half. So I'm going to say stop at selections again here. There we go. And then let's try that again. So not that great. Let's see what happens. I'm going to select everything and give it a cubic pass. That's a little bit better. I like what I have there. I mean, most of the parts I made were fairly flat to each side, so they have that going for them as far as that goes. So I have these, this, and this, all sort of selected and did the cubic unwrap. Now, all of these need to come together, right? I would have more of my bot, and so all of these UV maps need to be combined into one UV map using the UV pack here. And so let's select all of these. UV packing, and when you have a lot more parts, this takes a minute for it to figure out where everything goes. Oh, that did not go well. There we go. I think I threw it off with that previous one there. And let's say bounding box to make sure nothing Okay, things. Some of my parts are looking okay here. Let's see, where are those? Is this before I fix some of that stuff? Ah, it is. So this has some of that garbage geometry that was in from before. See, here my pack is rearranging some of the parts, which is not what I wanted there. We're going to try the first thing I always do when things are going wrong. Let's go back and make sure that everything is optimized like we think it should be. So I'm going to come back in here, point mode, and just run an optimize on each of the parts. And so let's run an optimize. Let's come here and grab this one. Run optimize. And then on the head. And we'll run a cubic on each of the parts. And then try the unpack again. There we go. Much better. Okay, so this, especially for our geometric stuff, this might be the way to go. So in the UV pack, once I started talking about, the beyond the two simple objects that we did earlier, I used geometric and made sure I preserve orientation selected. So geometric preserve orientation gave me something that was a little bit. Nikki says, I think the hider got selected too. I'll have to look. So that keeps everything oriented more like how I would want. Let's see what's going on right here. And so this one, yep, so I just got a bad model situation there. So let's practice what I preach and fix the geometry. Standard. Right, so right here, it looked fine, but this was sort of an overlap. And so on both of these, the bevel was too big. So let's say 0.1. There we go. And then on this one, also bevel 0.1. Right there. There we go. So make the geometry adjustment. Let's bring everything back. Control C, Control V. Connect objects, delete. All right, here we go, one more time. So again, using the cubic as the sort of default here, throw 3D UV. And I'll grab these and say I want to unpack them with cubic. There we go. Unpack with cubic. There we go. And unpack with cubic, since all of mine are kind of cubic shapes. Make sure that everything is selected. There we go. Now let's come back into UV packing, geometric. Ah! There we go. If he would just listen to what he says, he would do a better job, Casey said to himself. Okay. It's a little confusing. Right, and so why did UV stink? Because modeling was bad. Right? So I did the difficult thing. Go back to model and fix, right? Because once the geometry was clean, it was click, 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 done, right? As opposed to click, click, you know. So again, the process much easier, and the automatic tools, right? Just like it's like these are all fancier versions of the loop select, right? Loop select is our way of like selecting the whole way around the object. It's when you think about what it's doing, it's a pretty smart tool, and these tools are like more complicated algorithms than that, and they're designed by people who know modeling. And so when the tool itself doesn't work, is usually an indication that something about the geometry could be much better. Right, and so in that case, I had like overlapping inverted polygons because of the bevel. Like you guys saw what I saw there, right? Where the bevel went too far, and then things like turned inside out, and that resulted in the rest of it just not being very good. And so here, now, all the parts are laid out. Nice, right? And so in this case, everything went there. Jose sent me his somewhere. Let's do part of his robot. So don't be afraid to fix the geometry, you know, just because the and wait for it. All right. Jose, how'd you get this weird shadow? Yeah. How did you even do that? Like the eyes are transparent, I guess. Jose, did you click some sort of strange camera or shadow option? Yeah, nursing student Nikki, also known as animation student Nikki, asks, are those little spots causing the thing that stretches across everything else. Yeah, so when I run the cubic, like, boom, you could see all the main parts, right? But the first time I ran it when it was not so great, there was also that little bit of garbage down there at the bottom, right? Those handful of like, what are those things? And then as I went forward with the process, those tiny little inaccuracies just it blew up the whole process, right? And so if you're seeing a bunch of tiny garbage when you run the initial UV unwrap, that's a problem. Okay, so your bot here, a few things. So this is the simplified bot, not the procedural bot. Yeah, looks like you got everything baked down. And so a few changes I would make here, Jose, is that your rounding here is a little too much, right? I would say, as a rule, everybody, bevel, let's unless it's a huge rounded part, let's say 3 subdivisions. Divisions, there we go. All right, and so you've got quite a bit more than that there, right? Which is going to make everything a little bit more. Nursing student Nikki says, I tried to change my name, but it wouldn't let me. I mean, that's your like personal email name, right? Not the GCC one. Although I don't know. Like when you guys are just watching. So that's one thing I would clean up there. Let's see the rest of it. I'm going to turn off all the fancy stuff for right now and just focus on the geometry. Okay, yeah, like I was saying, yeah, this beveling here is probably a little bit much. So it's like a washing machine. There's a door here. I like the door handle. Okay, so here this is raising some red flags on this handle here. I'm not quite sure how you made this handle. But this definitely doesn't need to be as complicated as you made it there. This handle, I would probably do something like this, like cube here, here, and then do something, hit C, and then say KL for loop cut. Probably here, and then just extrude here and here. There you go, handle, right? And then how would you round the edges on this one? What are the 2 main tools, Riley, we use for rounding the edges? Name one of them.
Like fillet cap or the tools?
Fillet cap, yeah, so that does it on a primitive, right? But what's the purple object that starts with a B that we've been using? Bevel.
Okay.
Yes, I've specifically warned against the bend object. If you're bending an object, chances are you probably want to do it with a sweep, right? Bevel, and then Kyler, what's the other rounding strategy? Subdivision surface, right? And so which one of these, Anna, for getting this handle rounded, do you think will be better here?
Subdivision surface.
Yeah. So let me prove it to you here, right? So in this case, we want this to look like the handle to a dishwasher, right? And so if I put this in here like this, this gets really rounded, right? Versus this, you got to think: is it something that's more organic, or is it more mechanistic? Usually, bevel would be more mechanistic, and then the subdivision surface would be more organic, right? And so the bevel here, let's follow the rule I just figured out. So we'll say 3 subdivisions, a little bit rounder, and then make sure that we use the check, not that one. There we go, Fong break rounding, right? And so we get, like sort of a cleaner thing there, right? If it was like a trippy dishwasher, man, like maybe, you know, something like that makes more sense, right? If it was really small, again, also it wouldn't probably matter a whole bunch. I mean, this one, subdivision surface is going to modify the shape more, right? Where bevel is sort of looking for the angles. And so it depends what you're after there. Jose, are you seeing? Jose says, what took me like half an hour, you just redid in 10 seconds. So here, yeah, this would be, in fact, I'm going to replace her handle with this one. And so Control X, and come back to Jose's thing, kitchen bot, Control V. Whoa, T, E, there we go. Whoa, too small. T, uh-oh. There we go. All right, that's cleaned up now. That was the one stuck out to me right away. Right, so I guess the first step of UV unwrapping is to take a survey of your geometry and then ask yourself the hard questions. Should this be changed? Are these holes here, or did you just texture this differently? What part is this? Oh, this is a vacuum. Okay, there we go. Okay, no, that looks fine.
Why is there Z fighting?
What's that?
Why is there Z fighting along the white stripe?
Yeah, it looks, let's see what it, Jose, Kyler is calling you out here in person for your Z fighting. He said, hey man, what's up with that Z fighting? It looks lame. I'm embellishing, but that was what he implied. So let's, yeah, so when you see these like lines here, it looks like something is overlapping. It's hard to see. Let's delete this polygon. Oh!
Yeah.
Yep, so it looks like you overlaid one thing on top of like directly on top of something else. So I'm not quite sure how you made these white parts. It looks like you duplicated them somehow here. I'm not even sure how you do that. It's the color? Yeah, I don't know. It's like yeah, somehow you duplicated this white part here where you wouldn't want to duplicate these polygons. You just want to cut the existing ones into that pattern, right? And so here I'm just sort of cleaning up these things. Although I didn't see it. Kyler saw it right off the bat. It's because I'm old and I can't see anything anymore. Here, let's get
And then
these.
also you're a former and current drummer, so you're losing your hearing.
What? It's not looking good. So these so we're going to call this week Geometry Cleanup Week.
I think he extruded the lines.
Yeah, I think that might be what happened. Jose, maybe you grabbed the line and instead of just dragging it, you might have control drug it, which would create another polygon over top of that polygon. Let me see if I can do that even. So right, if I grab this edge here, and then I hit E to control drag this way. Yeah, there we go. And then you could, color that one separately. Well, it's facing the opposite direction. So I control drag it this way. And then maybe if I grab this polygon here. Yeah, then if I put this thing on it. Yeah, and so that's what I see how. Yeah, so I don't think you cut the white stripes somehow. You ended up dragging them. And so here, you do want to cut, right? And so, did I get rid of this one? I still have it here. Right, and so we want to go KL, like right here. Let's see, is this going to find it? Yeah, right about there. And then KL here, KL there. And now, with these polygons, UL there, and I'll just do it there and there, making a slightly different uniform for your pot. There we go. And so now if I drug those on there, that would be a different color, and it would not be, you don't have the stacked polygons. Everybody understand why that was bad? Danielle, does that make sense? Right? So we don't want, the thing that Jose had wrong there was the handle was just, kind of everything was on top of each other. But here, the name, like Kyler called out, Z Fighting. Is that just a cool name, or what does that actually mean? It sounds like it could be an anime, right? Z Fighting Season 3?
It's like in Dragon Ball Z, they call them Z Fighters.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I heard it and I'm like, I can't think of anything else now.
Like all the fighters in Dragon Ball Z are?
Yeah, like as a group, they're the Z Fighters.
What is the premise of that? Is it ostensibly it's like a tournament thing? Is that?
Dragon Ball, there's multiple premises.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just fight. That's it. The first one is like the world tournament, but then they're always training for something bigger.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's usually alien threatens X, and then Z fighters gotta go fight him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a bigger alien.
I don't know how they came up with so many episodes.
And you're still going.
They are? They're still making new ones?
So Z Fighting, right? Like in Dragon Ball Z, like I just learned. Two polygons in the same place, right? And you see the blinking triangles is how it presents itself, right? And then not blinking triangles, right? Blinking. And you don't want that, right? You need to eliminate one of the polygons. So 2 polygons enter, 1 polygon leaves. Right? You have to get rid of the polygon. That's like a polygon deathmatch. You have to delete one of them. Everybody with me there? Okay, and so we clean that up. And so in your case, your guy is fairly square, meaning, not uncool, just square shaped. And also, let's look at, so the eyes here, are these separate parts?
No.
Interesting.
Did he make a transparent material?
Interesting.
Oh, okay. I think this is why the eyes looked weird in the shadow.
Oh, you're seeing the inside. You are seeing the inside.
Okay, so here's another thing to clean up geometry. Are normals, right? And so your eyes here, let me just, do they look really blue because of this? Oh no, they look fine. Your normals are not inverted, you just have the transparent texture on there. That's fine. Yeah, that looks good. As far as making this see-through, It's fine. It's fine the way it is right now. So let's leave that. Ideally, you may want to have something in here so that it's not just transparent into emptiness. Like even just another square or something. So the good news is, Jose, most of your stuff here strikes me as a good candidate for cubic unwrapping, right? Because it's square-ish here. And so you've got yours broken down into, there's the handle, right? That's the handle I just made. Let me go ahead and here's the door handle geometry. The stuff with the bevel, you'd want to further, you got to bake that down, right? And so, for instance, the vacuum down here, let's grab this one and also say current state, or connect objects and delete. There we go. And so let's just do the body. What is this bevel doing? Okay, that. Yeah, so Jose, you just have your bevels set too high, right? This is too much geometry on the edge, right? So this bevel, I'm going to turn it down to our maximum allowed bevel now, which is 3. And then grab all of this and say current connect objects and delete. There we go. All right, and so here's the body and the neck and the head. All right, and just to do these parts here, let's go to UV unwrap. Cool. And let's do this one at a time. So here, I'm going to go ahead and grab all the polygons. And like I said, your parts are fairly square, so the cubic unwrapping, the neck you did from a cylinder or something. And so if we grab this and we look at the UV map for the neck, this is fine. The body needs some work here, so let's go ahead and grab all of these and come over here, cubic, and apply. And at first glance, okay, but then at second glance, there is some this happening, right? And so that's usually a sign, where is that stuff? And so how do I find it? I can highlight it over here, and then it selects it over here, right? And so that makes it easier to see. Right, and so is all of this from this piece here? Let's see. We grab all of it, or UW for select connected. And so with this tiny part here, let's say cubic for that tiny part. That cleaned that up a little bit. And now if we grab everything and sort of just realign, we still have some weird parts. So if I say UW, yeah, it connects all those things. Where are these tiny parts here? These little triangles. It doesn't seem like this tiny circle should be so strange. There we go. Let's grab all of these. Come back here and say UL.
Maybe try optimizing?
Yeah, something might have weird happened there. Let's try the optimize. So grab the parts, all optimize. Make sure there's some fusing. Come back here. There we go. Nice. We've optimized away the garbage. There we go. That looks much better. Now cube head, this should be, if ever there was a candidate for cubic, there it is. And it even pulled out the eyes. That looks fine. We would want to do the eyes to make sure that they laid out by themselves. You could just grab, you have them as a separate selection here. So I could get both of these and just those around that part. In this case, we just want the eyes there. There we go. And so I'm just going to select that and say packed. There we go. And now I get everything, and just reorganize it. Yep. Okay, so there we go. And the eyes here and here. There we go. And so now, time to grab everything all together and pack it. Pack, apply. I don't think I grabbed everything. Here we go. A, apply. Ta-da! There we go. Looks like we have minimal, yeah, the tiny parts here are not, we're not getting into that tiny garbage. Yeah, the stripes, so we're going to be able to paint much more complicated things onto it and not be, Jose, I'm just going to need you to trust me. All right, next week when we get into Substance Painter, you'll think back on this week when I destroyed the stripes on your robot, and I've opened up a whole new world for robot patterning for you, that at that point, you'll thank me. You'll say, thanks, Casey. So just stay with it for now. But we need, I know this isn't very super fun. I don't know a whole lot of people online that are like, man, I'm really into UV unwrapping. And there are parts of this that are getting more and more automatic all the time, right? The fact that we can just hit a button after doing some preparation and it does most of the work here is great. And every year it gets closer and closer to like kind of almost automatic. But yeah, and then you can go from there. Jose says, you could send me this file if you want, just saying. So everybody's got their robot optimized. Try and do a first pass of the parts, UV unwrapping the parts. Okay? Don't worry about packing them all together. Just try to, like I said, the first part of packing all the parts together is to unwrap each individual part. And try to get each individual part to a point that makes sense for Wednesday. Does that sound good, everybody? You guys playing at home? Sound good? No, Nikki, you don't have to pack together the parts you want to have the same material. We'll pack everything into one UV space, and then we'll take it from there. Okay? You don't need to, it just needs to be in the same space. That's all. But once we bring it into Substance Painter, it'll make more sense. But nothing in Substance Painter or any other texturing application will be available to you until the model has a UV map of some kind. It's just the way it goes. Right? You're taking 2D stuff and wrapping it around a 3D object. You kind of need to have it there. But don't worry about packing the UVs for Wednesday. Just worry about getting an intelligible UV map for each part of the robot. All right? Making sense? Okay. All right. Have at it. And you guys on the chat. Oh, Emily applauded. Cool. I hope that is a little bit more clear. If there's parts that are totally, what did we learn today? If the UV unwrapping is not going easy, where you just press apply and it kind of works out of the box, it's probably a sign something about your model is not great, right? And so I went back and fixed my model by decreasing the beveling. We fixed Jose's model by decreasing some of the beveling and optimizing, right? That's sort of my first go-to for fixing any model where it looks like there's a bunch of junk. Let's optimize this and fuse it together so that we know it's not a bunch of extra parts. So really, UV unwrapping is about going back and facing your past mistakes. Taking a hard look at previous selves and the modeling mistakes.
Why would you do that?
Yeah. There's so many things that past Casey has done that current Casey is not happy about. All right, so try and get the UV unwraps for Wednesday, guys. Talk to you later. Casey out. How's that? I need some like tag, right? And then like a thing that plays at the end.